But act natural. Act natural. Be yourself. Oh, man. So I've had dozens of students, producers, engineers that I mentored over the past few years. And here are the three most common mix mistakes that I see the most often. And a lot of this stuff might sound like review and going back to the basics and the fundamentals, but we have to start there, man. Because if we're skipping over these fundamentals, we're just causing problems for ourselves in the future. So let's be like a friend to ourselves, and anticipate some of these problems before they even happen. So in the end, we're doing more mixing and less fixing. And in the end, you'll actually find yourself doing a lot less work and getting better results. So the first thing I want to go over is gain staging. And I know when you hear the term gain staging, you think to yourself, like, these engineers and their terms and this is not just about old engineers on analog consoles trying to tell you analog is better and gain staging. It's like, no, gain staging is still important. And the real reason is because everything that you're doing in your DAW is really just emulating what they used to do in major recording studios on analog consoles, right? It's just stuffed into your laptop, made a lot more easy, a lot more convenient, and a lot cheaper. Cheaper being a big factor, right? But all of these theories and these audio principles still apply, right? Even in your DAW. They apply a little differently, but they still apply. So gain staging is not something we can just like jump right over and just think that it doesn't matter anymore. The first thing I did here is just drag and drop a kick drum loop from Splice. Let's just get right into this. So this is peaking at about -1.5 here. And we do have headroom on the master and we do have headroom on the kick drum, right? But we have to anticipate when you add other instruments and other sounds and other vocals, this is going to just pile up and it's just going to keep making your signal louder and louder, especially into the master channel. It's going to have your master clipping. And we want to avoid these problems in the future. We want to be a friend to our future selves, anticipate these kinds of things, right? So I never really have my kick drums or any sounds that loud. Let's see. And there's a few ways to address this too, right? So first and foremost, we could just take the gain down here if we wanted to on Pro Tools. You see that gives us a lot more headroom already in our master and in our individual channel. Gives you a lot more headroom to work with and play with. And I'll show you why that's important too. If we were just EQing, for example, here, and I just wanted to bump something, I can start clipping here on my EQ. I'm clipping on my channel. I'm clipping on my master. I'm clipping everywhere, right? And this is an example of poor gain staging, of course. But again, you don't have headroom to work with. So when you're adjusting volumes and you're adjusting EQs, there's not much headroom to work with here. Another way to address that would be right here in the EQ. The output level. We're not clipping anymore in the EQ. We're not clipping more on our channel. We're not clipping anymore in the master, right? And here's the third way that we can do this. We can do some subtractive EQ before the compressor, and then we can do some additive EQ after the compressor, right? So that's what I did here, just to give you guys an example of how to like control these levels and these peaks. So I have this going into a compressor now, getting a decent amount of compressor, about -2 gain reduction here on the meter. But then I have my output gain, right? And I could tame that here. And as you can see, I can still do my EQ bump here and I won't be clipping, plenty of headroom there. And these are just some examples of how to like control your levels and make sure you have headroom and good gain staging so you have room to work. That's the main point here. It's not only that you don't want to send sounds into clipping, obviously, right? Because you're just killing the transients, you're killing the dynamics. The number 2 point is we need headroom to work with. So that's another important factor here. So this is the top mix mistake that I see people overlooking and not taking serious enough. And I just see things clipping in their master and in their channels and inside of their EQs, and everything is just clipping before they even attempt to mix. And then they don't know why they can't quite get the mix to sound the way they want it to sound. Again, be a friend to your future self, anticipate these issues and control those levels, man. Practice good gain staging, make it a habit. make it second nature so you don't even have to think about this stuff, you know? The second biggest mix mistake I see people making is too much EQ, too much subtractive EQ specifically. Like they're carving things out like very extreme and they're getting like this thin, harsh mix, right? And I see this too often. And they think a clean, quote unquote, clean mix translates to a good mix because things aren't like interfering. But you're also making the mix really thin and really harsh. You're cutting out the bad as well as the good. And we don't really want to do that, right? We want to cut out the bad and be more specific and keep the good. So we're not making our mixes thin, harsh, lifeless, you know? So let's not do any extreme EQing. Let's be specific. Even besides a high pass, we can do other options like a low shelf, for example. A low shelf could give us a similar effect if we're cutting here at 36 hertz. We just bring that down if those low end frequencies are like interfering with your baseline or something like that. There's a lot of ways to address this, but let's be specific about what we're doing. Then we have like that bump here on 80 hertz. So we're giving the kick a little more bump. See, now we started going into clipping, back into gain staging mode here, right? See if we want anything else out of this kick. Let's brighten up the top end to our high shelf. Say we wanted to brighten up the top end to get it to cut through the mix more. Being a dance kick, you know, in dance music, that's a driving factor. And sometimes you layer it with like little hats or little sounds to give you some air up top. So if you want to poke that out a little more. Right now we're poking out 80 hertz is where you get the majority of the bump from your kick. The top end is going to give us that little like hat. It's going to get us to like cut through the mix more. We're low shelving everything below 36 hertz. So again, being specific about what we're doing and why we're doing it, right? And not exaggerating and just doing these kinds of cuts and bumps and like things like this. It just gets you a harshness that you don't really want, right? And if you do that with every sound in your mix, you're going to get this thin, harsh mix. And I see that a lot. And it was a mistake I made a lot in the beginning. And that's why I can recognize it so quickly. Not only having like all these different students and they're doing the same thing. I think it's just a common mistake with mixers that are just beginning their journey because they want to make everything clean, everything polished. And they just start cutting out the good along with the bad. And there's a lot of exaggerating when it comes to EQing. But this also comes with time and training your ears to your room with your monitors, or training your ears simply just to your headphones. And getting used to these things so you can get more specific about your EQs and not be so harsh and so extreme with them. Kind of choose what you're doing, but do everything for a reason, right? Like that's the most important thing. That's what I stress and emphasize the most. Then the third thing I want to address is the misuse of compression. It's either too much compression, not enough compression, and I'll show you exactly what I mean here. Right now, this is a healthy amount of compression, -2. We can stay around here. I actually like to say a general rule of thumb is -3 to -5 gain reduction on the compression. So we're around that ballpark. I like to keep it around -3. This kick drum doesn't need much compression. The more compression you do, it does fatten it up a little bit. So that's good. That's kind of like what we want. We're not really like trying to tame or control dynamics here too much because it's kind of just like already controlled and tamed. So that's one aspect. But I see people with their compressors on, but it's here. So they're not really getting any gain reduction. Or they're here and they're just smashing their signal, killing the transients and all dynamics for absolutely no reason. There's really no benefit in that. You're kind of like, you're better off just using the regular kick drum if that's the case, right? This sounds a lot better. So again, back to knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. Keep a healthy amount of gain reduction. That's usually anywhere from like 2 to 5 dB. I like 3 to 5 dB. I like to keep it around there. But again, we're listening first, right? It's not just choosing numbers because I said to choose a number or trying to choose a number because that's what you heard or read on the internet. We're listening first, right? This kick might not even need a compressor. This kick might not even need EQ. And that's the point, right? And when I popped it in, it didn't really need much gain staging either. But we don't know what context this kick is going to be in yet. We don't know what other instruments we're going to add. We don't know what type of record this is going to be. It's just a kick right now, right? So in context, all of these things can change, and we want to anticipate these things and keep all these little rules of thumb in mind. And I'm going to keep stressing them. I want these things to be second nature to you. And that's what mastery is really all about, that these things are just more of like a reflex, and we don't have to keep going back to these fundamentals. You'll just start to have better habits, and these things, you won't even have to think about these things as much anymore. And that's really the point I want to stress here. Hope you guys enjoyed that and learned something. Don't forget, if you haven't already checked it out, my first book is live on Amazon, 4 Horsemen of Mixing and Music Production. It goes over a lot of these topics that we just went over and goes into them a little further. And the point of this book is for you guys to have like a little handbook laying around your desktop, laying around your coffee table in the studio. And it's for something for you to always refer back to. You see, you got little graphs and pictures and little things that I designed. It took me a while to design it. Keep going over these concepts and these fundamentals, and until these things are ingrained in your subconscious and they become second nature, you'll find yourself reaching only for the tools that you need, right? And ultimately be in service to the song and your client, right? And not your ego. And not the software companies and plugins and things like this, right? We love all the software companies. We love all the plugins. We love all the new technology. We love the AI. We love all of that stuff. It helps us get the job done quicker. It helps us to be more efficient. That's fantastic. But if you're missing the fundamentals and you're skipping over the fundamentals because you're getting lost in a sea of information and software and plugins and tools, then that's not a great thing, man. And we got to dial it back. That's why I always love to dial it back, get back to the basics, get back to the fundamentals. Make sure you really, really, really understand what you're doing. And then if you want to use all the cool tools, man, to be more efficient and just have fun with it, that's great. But if you don't understand the fundamentals, you're not really gonna even understand what these tools are trying to do for you, you know? So let's get back to it and make sure you're not skipping over these things. Let's focus on mastery, getting these things ingrained into your subconscious. So it's more of like a reflex, and these things are second nature. And then have some fun with it, you know? Use those skills to create the things that you love. And that's what this channel is really about. So if you like what you see, you know, don't forget to do all the YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, all of that cool stuff, you know. Helps me grow the channel so I could keep bringing more content, more books, more things that'll help you guys out. So until next time, Coast to Sound TV.